They say there's a corridor deep inside the Winter Palace, hidden behind a locked wing long abandoned by courtiers and servants, a hallway without mirrors, without portraits, without windows, only shadows, and sometimes, only sometimes, a faint echo of footsteps can be heard, soft, deliberate, gliding, as if someone walks without truly existing, as if the person was left behind, and only the shape remains. They call her the Masked Queen. She was not born royalty, but for a brief, trembling moment in history, she became the center of a Tsar's world. A woman whose beauty once silenced entire courtrooms, whose gaze could command poets to write and noblemen to kneel. Her face, her presence, her voice, they were all her crown. And then, one morning, a porcelain bottle laced with acid shattered across her skin. In 1 second, beauty turned into agony, power turned into horror, love turned into silence. The Tsar wept, they say. But power has no patience for disfigurement, so she was hidden, not killed. No, death would have been too loud, too scandalous. Instead, she was carefully erased, moved into a secluded wing of the palace, served only by deaf-mute maids, forbidden from speaking, forbidden from mirrors, forbidden from being seen. A silk mask was crafted, silver-threaded, lifeless, blank, and she wore it not as costume, but as prison, and so she lived. Not as queen, not as mistress, not even as ghost, but as something else entirely. A memory no one was allowed to keep. Visitors whispered that she still walked the halls late at night, draped in velvet and sorrow. That if you caught a glimpse of her face beneath the mask, you'd see nothing, not because it was blank, but because it was too full of what you didn't want to know. Because she reminded them that beauty is a contract, and once broken, the world forgets you ever existed. But she remembers, every mirror removed, every servant reassigned, every letter burned, every inch of herself dismantled for the comfort of others. She remembers what it's like to be loved, to be envied, to be worshipped, and then to be feared, pitied, forgotten. This is not the story of a queen who ruled a nation. This is the story of a woman who once ruled a man and paid the price for being seen. Stay with us as we step inside the shadowed corridors of 18th century Russia, where mirrors were forbidden and love was punished by silence. Discover the haunting story of the woman who once captivated a Tsar and was then hidden behind velvet curtains and a silver mask. This is not just a tale of beauty lost, but of identity dismantled, and of the chilling price one pays for being too visible in a world built on appearances. Russia in the mid-18th century was a land of contradictions, a kingdom draped in fur and frost, ruled by emperors who read Enlightenment philosophy by candlelight, and signed executions in the same breath. The Winter Palace, rising from the icy banks of the Neva River, glowed like a jewel, but its corridors whispered of secrets, betrayal, and the unbearable weight of appearances. The Tsar, Peter III, was no icon of majesty. Described by foreign envoys as childish, erratic, and dangerously naive, he preferred playing with toy soldiers over ruling real ones. His court was a stage of instability, where sycophants jostled for influence and alliances were forged over wine and destroyed by glances. But in that chaos, one woman stood out, not by birth, but by presence. Her name, now almost erased from official records, was Anastasia Mikhailovna Yelagina. She was born not of royal blood, but of a respected boyar family from the provinces. Her father served as a regional magistrate. Her mother, a woman of uncommon education, taught her French before she could even write in Russian. Anastasia arrived at court not through arranged marriage or inherited title, but by invitation, handpicked as a lady-in-waiting for Grand Duchess Catherine herself. But it was not the Empress who noticed her first. It was the Tsar. Peter was smitten, or perhaps obsessed. In the haze of imperial boredom, and marital coldness, Anastasia became his escape, a woman of wit, of quiet confidence, of sharp eyes that seemed to look through silk and ceremony. She did not speak to impress, she listened to understand, and she was beautiful. In a court where powdered cheeks and porcelain skin were as valuable as gold, Anastasia possessed a rare kind of allure, natural, unforced, even defiant. Her beauty was not a decoration. It was a weapon, and she wielded it unknowingly. Rumors bloomed like frost across window panes, that the Tsar visited her chambers at night, that he gifted her a sapphire brooch, once belonging to his mother, that Catherine, already humiliated by Peter's indiscretions, seethed in silence. But the danger did not come from the Empress. It came from jealousy, raw, feminine, lethal. There were others at court, noble women born into dynasties, raised to marry power, taught from birth how to charm emperors. And here was Anastasia, provincial, unwed, untitled, stealing their gaze, their place, their future. Some wanted her removed, politely. Others wanted her ruined. One night, after a masquerade, Anastasia returned to her room to find a gift on her vanity. A perfume vial, crystal cut, resting atop a note, "To the most radiant star in the sky." She opened it, and in an instant, the star fell. The vial had been tampered with. What was meant to be perfume now contained a solution so acidic it had eaten through the glass. It splashed across her face, neck, and chest. Her screams were said to echo through the east wing, stopping music in mid-note. She survived, but survival was not mercy. The damage was irreversible. Skin melted into itself, eyelids torn, lips seared, one eye clouded forever. The surgeons could do little. What remained was not a face. It was a mask of pain. And so the court decided she must disappear. No scandal, no trial, no suspects, no arrests. The Tsar, now pressured by nobles and humiliated by whispers, agreed. Anastasia was quietly relocated to a hidden wing of the palace, far from the public eye. A doctor was assigned to her, a tailor commissioned to create a silver silk mask, expressionless, smooth, and cold. She was given a private room with no mirrors. Servants were forbidden to speak to her or look at her directly. Her letters were intercepted. Her name was removed from court documents. Even her portrait, once commissioned for a gallery, was quietly taken down and burned. In the official records of the imperial household, Anastasia Mikhailovna Yelagina died the year of the masquerade. But she did not die. She walked the halls. She ate alone. She read in silence. And at night, she stood before empty walls, trying to remember the face that once was hers. What is a woman in a palace like this without a face? Not a mistress, not a noble, just a woman the court chose to forget. The room she was given had no windows. That she noticed first. Then the mirrors were gone, not just covered, removed entirely. Even the polished silverware was dulled, replaced with wooden utensils. Reflections, in any form, were now considered dangerous. Not to her, but to the dignity of the palace, to the illusion that all remained untouched. They said it was for her comfort, but the real reason was simpler. They couldn't bear to look. The few servants allowed near her were instructed never to speak unless spoken to, and even then, to keep their eyes low. They were rotated every few weeks, never staying long enough to know her name. Their presence was like that of ghosts, glimpsed then gone. Only the physician stayed, a man of quiet discipline. He tended to her wounds with solemn hands. He applied the salves without flinching, never asking questions, never offering pity. He was, perhaps, the last man in the empire who saw her face without recoiling. When the mask arrived, wrapped in violet silk, delivered in a lacquered box like a royal gift, she refused it at first. She threw it across the room, screamed until her throat gave out. But the silence that followed was more suffocating than rage. No one responded. No one came. No one cared. And so, eventually, she put it on. It fit well. Crafted by an artisan known for death masks, it was made of silk and lacquer, reinforced with silver thread. Smoothed out, blank, expressionless. A face designed to have no history. In time, it became her only face. Her name, once murmured through palace halls like a secret prayer, was no longer spoken, not even in rumors. It vanished from letters, from conversation, from memory. Even the Tsar, who once traced the curve of her cheek with trembling fingers, avoided the subject like a curse. Catherine, his wife, now rising in power, ensured it stayed that way. Anastasia had become a liability, a reminder that the empire's beauty was fragile. That power could not protect. That desire could be disfigured. So they buried her, not in earth, but in silence. She was allowed to walk, but only at night. The palace guards were given new routes. Servants were instructed to clear hallways during her hours. The eastern wing became a place of quiet fear. People avoided it. Even rats, it seemed, knew not to linger too long. She walked slowly, her silk slippers soundless on marble floors. The mask caught the moonlight in strange ways, reflecting just enough to remind those who glimpsed her that she was still alive, still watching, still breathing beneath the shell. And yet, in her own mind, she was beginning to fade. It started with her voice. She stopped speaking, first to others, then to herself. Words felt foreign, even inside her head. Sentences broke apart. Memory fractured. Her inner monologue, once sharp, poetic, became a fog of images. Frost on glass, heat on skin, screams without sound. She forgot what she looked like, not the ruined face. She could feel that. The taut, scarred skin, the collapsed cheekbone, the roughness of her left eyelid that no longer blinked. No, she forgot the before. The Anastasia that once was. The girl with the cobalt dress. The girl who laughed in the garden. The girl who held the Tsar's hand beneath the table while diplomats argued over war and trade. She tried to remember her smile, but her mind gave her the mask. There was one mirror left. She found it by accident, tucked in an abandoned dressing room, covered in dust and sheet. A shard, really, broken from a larger piece, perhaps. Jagged, discolored. She stared at it for hours, not at her face, at the mask. The silver gleamed, but offered no comfort. She saw no eyes, no lips, no Tom. Just a placeholder for something that used to matter. And then she saw something else, or thought she did. A second mask. Behind her, faint. In the darkened reflection, a double. Watching her watch herself, she turned. Nothing. But the cold in her spine remained. From that night forward, she no longer trusted shadows. The years passed, measured only by the creaks of floorboards and the slow dulling of pain. The wounds healed, but the nerves never forgot. Some nights she woke screaming from dreams that were not dreams, dreams of burning, of melting, of hands holding her down. She never wrote letters. She had no one to write to. Her family, out of fear or shame, had gone silent long ago. Some said they were given land in the north in exchange for their complaints. Others whispered darker things. What mattered was this: no one came. She could have left, or tried. But where would she go? The world beyond the palace would be worse. In the court, she was a ghost. Out there, she would be a monster. A woman without a face. What claim did she have to identity? To survival? And so she remained, alive, but not living, breathing, but not seen. A relic of a love no one acknowledged, a punishment no one spoke of, a mirror cracked beyond repair. Sometimes, the Tsar would pass her wing, drunk, distracted, lost in thought. He never entered. Once, she heard him pause, just outside the door. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Then footsteps, fading. She wondered, later, if he had been afraid of what he might see. not the mask, but the woman behind it. The palace bells rang 12 times. Each chime felt like a strike against her ribs, not from sound, but memory. It was her first time hearing music from the ballroom in years. She had not been invited, of course, but that night, they forgot to seal the windows, or perhaps someone wanted her to hear it. The wedding was taking place beneath the grand chandelier, the one she once danced beneath. Gliding in sapphire silk, her hair pinned with pearls, her fingers entwined with his. That ballroom had once echoed with her laughter. Tonight, it echoed with his vows. She had not asked whose wedding it was, but she knew Catherine had waited long enough. By now, she was more than a wife. She was the future of the empire. The ministers stood behind her. The soldiers, too, even the clergy whispered her name with caution and reverence. Peter, the Tsar, had not grown wiser, only older. But power had begun to slip from his hands like snow between fingers. This marriage, this ceremony, this coronation masked as union was not just about love or loyalty. It was about finality, and Anastasia was not part of it. She stood in the darkened gallery above the ballroom, behind a curtain that was not fully drawn. No one looked up, no one knew, or perhaps no one cared. She wore the silver mask. The servants had tried to dress her. It was, after all, a special night. But she refused the gown they offered. She wore black, unadorned, silent as morning. Below, chandeliers flickered against golden walls. Musicians played a string quartet, a piece she remembered. They had danced to it once, barefoot in his chamber, drunk on stolen wine. He had called her his eternity. Now he smiled at another woman, kissed her hand before the court, and swore fealty to God, crown, and wife. Anastasia did not cry. She watched. Each gesture felt rehearsed, each smile polished. But the kiss was real, or at least real enough. She leaned her head against the cold wall, not because she was faint, but because she needed something real to touch. Her skin, even beneath the mask, felt distant, numb. She wondered, for the first time, if she had died that night. Not the night of the wedding, the night of the vow. And all this had been some grotesque afterlife where you watched yourself be erased, slowly, politely, thoroughly. The music rose, glasses clinked, laughter erupted, and then a moment so brief, she almost missed it. He looked up, not at her, not exactly, but toward the upper gallery, his brow furrowed. He squinted, then blinked. She stepped back, into shadow. Had he seen her, or had he only felt a memory? She stayed there long after the music died, long after the guests had gone, long after the candles sputtered and the ballroom emptied into silence again. She descended the stairs alone, walked through the corridor slowly, each footfall echoing like a question. When she reached her wing, something was waiting. A letter folded no seal. Inside, 5 words. You were never invisible to me. No signature no name no Tom. She read it again and again. The handwriting was shaky faded familiar. Was it his? Or worse, was it pity? She crushed it in her hand, then smoothed it out. She kept it. Days passed, then weeks. The palace returned to routine. The Tsar rarely ventured to her wing now. Catherine had fully assumed command. Even the servants no longer feared her presence. They simply avoided it. One morning, she walked past a window. It had not been shuttered, and through it, for the first time in years, she saw her reflection. Not her face, the mask, but something had shifted. She touched it, not to remove it. She never did that anymore, but to feel the texture, the cold, the weight. It no longer felt like prison. It felt like armor. The realization struck her like thunder. All this time, she had begged, silently, desperately, to be seen again, to be remembered, to be returned. But now, watching the empire move on without her, The truth settled like ash in her chest. She would never be restored, because she had never been lost. She had been hidden, locked away like a secret, not because she was broken, but because she reminded them of something they feared, that beauty can be destroyed, that love can be revoked, that even the most radiant woman in the empire could vanish behind a single scream, and the world would adjust without her. That night, she stood before the old mirror shard she had hidden beneath a loose floorboard. It was cracked, rusted at the edge, barely capable of reflection. But still, she looked, not to find herself, but to see if she was still watching. And she was. She always had been. History rarely remembers women like Anastasia, not because they didn't matter, but because they became inconvenient, too tragic to celebrate, too complex to simplify, too broken to fit neatly into the gilded frame of court portraiture in the annals of royal history. Beauty has always been a kind of currency, and no one paid the price more dearly than women. Queens were married not for wisdom, but for warmth. Mistresses were chosen not for loyalty, but for skin. Even power itself, when it passed through feminine hands, often relied on the illusion of charm. But what happens when that illusion is shattered? What happens to a woman whose only accepted value was her appearance, when that appearance is violently taken away? Anastasia's story is not unique. Her suffering echoes through centuries, across empires and dynasties, from Byzantine princesses blinded in coups to French courtesans disfigured by rivals, from Roman noblewomen exiled for losing favor to Tudor queens beheaded when their beauty faded. The pattern is not new. It is simply unspoken. Royal courts, for all their opulence, were fragile theaters. Everything depended on the surface: polished marble, powdered faces, glimmering jewels, rehearsed smiles. To be ugly, or worse, to remind others of mortality, was a political risk, an eyesore in a hall of mirrors. And Anastasia became the mirror no one wanted to look into. Her mask was more than silk. It was symbolic. It made others feel safe again, safe from the truth that beauty was not eternal, that love could rot, that power could dissolve with a single scream in the night. In many ways, her erasure was an act of preservation, not of her dignity, but of the system itself. By hiding her, the court maintained its illusion. By forgetting her, the Tsar protected his image. By locking her away, the empire reaffirmed its rule: only the beautiful are worthy of attention. This obsession with appearance was not merely aesthetic, it was structural. A woman's face was her signature, her battlefield, her only language in a world that denied her voice. When Anastasia lost hers, she didn't just lose admiration, she lost participation. She became voiceless, not because she was mute, but because the world no longer had a place for her to speak. Even Catherine the Great, the woman who ultimately replaced her, understood this truth. Catherine wielded her image with surgical precision, commissioning portraits that flattered, publishing letters that charmed, reshaping her public self like a sculpture. She was not simply a monarch. She was an icon, because she had learned that power, for a woman, was inseparable from perception. And what of Anastasia? She became the negative space in history's painting, the shadow behind the throne, the secret at the heart of a palace. And that is perhaps the most haunting part of all. Not that she was buried, but that her burial was done without death, that she lived on, day after day, as a living symbol of everything the empire refused to acknowledge: pain, imperfection, silence. Survival today. Historians will not find her in the official archives. Her name does not appear on wedding rolls or court records. The mask she wore was never preserved. No painting exists. No memoir was written. But the corridor, the one without mirrors, is still there, closed to the public, sealed behind layers of restoration and indifference. Yet some say that late at night, under the right light, you can see it. And in that hallway, if you listen closely, You might hear footsteps, not angry, not hurried, just present, as if someone still walks there, not to be seen, but to remind us that she was. There is a door in the east wing of the Winter Palace. It bears no name, no handle, only a small seam in the wood, barely visible unless you know where to look. Most pass by without noticing, but those who do, those who stop, who linger, who place a hand against its grain, sometimes say they feel warmth, as if someone stood just behind it waiting. Some say it's nothing more than draft and myth, a story spawned by aging archivists and superstitious guards. Others swear they've heard soft footsteps beyond the wall, always at dusk, never during the day. But no one opens the door, not anymore, because behind it lies the hall, without mirrors, and in that hall walks a woman no one dares to remember, not because she was cruel, not because she was wicked, but because she was beautiful, and then she wasn't, because she was loved, and then she wasn't, because she reminded the empire that even its most adorned faces could burn and still survive. She does not speak, she does not cry, she does not sleep. She walks, each step a memory, each quarter a chapter no longer written. The mask she wears has not aged. The silk remains silver, the thread unbroken. But beneath it, no one knows what lingers, whether it is flesh or bone, sorrow or silence, vengeance or nothing at all. And perhaps that's the most tragic part. Not that we forgot her, but that we chose to, because it is easier to erase a face than to confront what disfigured it. So she remains, not alive, died, not dead, just present, a queen of no court, a bride of no altar, a face without reflection, walking forever in a palace built to forget her.